I call this thing 6 things I know, 6 million things I don't. And 6 million is probably on the short side. I do not believe that my approach is perfect and or all-encompassing and or possibly even right. I do believe there are some principles that I think I've kind of nailed down and I've either stolen from other coaches or had success with them myself working with kids over the last 6 or 7 years. But I'm okay with that. And I call it principles because we kind of want to, there's a difference between principles and methods. The succinct version of this quote is of methods there are many, of principles there are few. The general idea is that if we can agree on some core principles, right, it's okay for our methods to be different. The way that I coach my kids this year is not the same the way that David's going to do. It's not the same with Chris's. It shouldn't be the same because our styles are individual and our groups are individual. If we can agree on some principles, however, whether a kid has me this year and David next year or John the year after that, we can give them some continuity to develop on as they grow up in the league. So I'm trying to make this as absolutely simple as we can. Here are my 6 principles and this is it. We're going to start with a neutral grip. And what I mean by neutral grip, using my PVC slosh bat, is something where we're going to allow our goal to inform our start. I want to end up palm up, palm down at contact. I want to be in this strong wrist position, palm up, palm down. That's where I want to be. When I hit, I'm usually here in, I guess, a box grip. You have other kids who have what's more of a door knocker knuckle, where the middle knuckle kind of lines up and down the bat. Start is super important here because each person is going to have their own way that they move and swing the bat, and that's okay. So long as we allow them to feel what gets them palm up, palm down at contact. With a lot of young kids, what happens is they may start here, and they're waiting for that pitcher to figure it out, and they're hearing mom and dad screaming, and all of a sudden, all this tension turns into this. And this isn't a good movement position, this isn't a strong wrist position. So trying to get them to start somewhere neutral, either box or door knockers is about where we want to be. Balanced athletic stance. It's one of those things I look at this thing and I'm trying to not waste your guys' time. Yeah, I could probably just go athletic stance. That kind of goes without saying. Except, my daughter played softball last year, ends up on an all-star team co-leaguing with another league. So she's playing for a coach and staff on that team that I don't know from Adam, which is fine. They get to their first hitting practice, and the coach goes, takes all these kids who presumably have done enough over the course of the season to be selected as all-stars, and goes, we're going to start here, point both feet in, and then let the knees kind of work here, this thing, right? Hands are going to start here, we're going to go on a rail, and then whip the bat around. We're talking about a balanced athletic stance because generally what we're doing is we're talking about the way we interact with the ground. We're using the ground to generate ground force, right? It's like if I'm firing a rubber band, I need to be able to anchor that thing on something so I can generate some power. Ground force production is what we want. We want to get that out of an athletic stance. Generally, I tell kids, if you had to jump as high as you could, what does it look like? It doesn't look like this. It probably looks more like this. I'm going to get it down in my hips, flexion in my knees, and I'm going to fire up. That's a balanced athletic stance. But again, we have to accept that there's some variability in this in terms of how they get there. Because the other part of this, if we're going to again circle all the way back down to be on time, some kids are going to have a movement pattern where being on time for them may mean starting here and working here. It may mean starting here already. Bigger on the plane of the pitch. No ball thrown in baseball ever goes down from the pitcher's hand to the batter at a straight, zero, flat path, right? That does not happen. The ball loses velocity from when it's thrown to when it arrives at the plate. It descends. What we want to do is, this is Ted Williams 101. Teddy, and we have a slide for it later, called it the slight upswing. We want to match the path of the ball with the bat in an equal and opposite way. I would never say that to a kid. I would never say, you need to find the angle of the pitch and you need to meet it with the bat going in an equal and opposite direction. I'll tell you why later, but I would never say that to a kid. But generally, if we want to maximize surface contact between a round object and another round object, we need to be on plane. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Being on time, you could have perfect mechanics. You could look like Barry Bonds and Albert Pujols incarnate. Little dash of Ted Williams in there too. You could be perfect, and if you're not on time, it doesn't matter. You could have god-awful swing mechanics. You could look completely uncoordinated and unathletic, and if you are on time, you give yourself a possibility of good outcomes. So we gotta be on time. We'll get more into that later. Our outcome, we wanna hit the ball hard in the air, and I'm not talking about launch angle, but I am talking about optimal results, and there's a reason why. Why do we wanna hit it in the air? One of these guys is the All-Star, or is the AL MVP. The other is a dude that plays for the Yankees. The difference in terms of biomechanical movement, force production between Jose Altuve and Aaron Judge couldn't be more different. It can't. They almost look like they're not the same series. However, when it comes to solving a problem at the major league level, highest level of consequence, highest level of competition, both of these guys have found an approach that's successful by hitting the ball in the air. And we're not talking about cultivating an approach that ends up with pop-ups and weak stuff. We're talking about hard contact in the air. Again, with the highest level of competition and the highest level of consequence, right? And obviously Little League Baseball is much less than that. With 388 hitters, had more than 100 balls or more in play. There were 2 people that had a higher weighted on-base average. Basically, the likelihood that you got on base by being below 10 degrees and above it. So basically we're saying 386 of them had better results when they hit the ball at more than 10 degrees exit. And what we mean by that is if this table is a complete 100% flat, 0 angle, 10 degrees, we're talking about something like ish, maybe. We're talking about, which again, imagine what we're coming to. We're coming to a ball that descends into the plate. We're matching with equal and opposite. 386 guys had better results by hitting the ball in the air. How does that work? Well, this is 2016 stats. The hardest hit balls were obviously, I mean, this is kind of, this is just right on the face of it, right? The best results you have generally is stuff that's its hardest. However, the average launch angle by base hit type in 2016, you can just right up the bat, 7 degrees, 17, 20, 28. What does that tell you? Balls that were hit in the air more generally had better results. How does this apply to kids? Because yeah, Jose Altuve and Aaron Judge are very different in terms of their force production, biomechanical movement. They're completely different, right? And they are way more skeletally aware and coordinated and muscular, no matter how much their size difference than a kid. However, this is why this applies to kids. Batted ball speeds, right? This is our chart on the left. We did clinics last year, and I got data samples from 250, made a touch under 300 kids. 40 to 45 to 50 degree or 50 mile an hour bat speed is not unusual at all. This is what happens. If you hit this ball at 40 miles an hour, right? And you hit it at 0, flat, no angle whatsoever. If you don't put any lift into that ball, you hit it dead square, how far is it going to travel? 36 feet. Or 31 feet, sorry. You put 30 degrees angle on that thing, well now we're up to 98. Now we're in the green. 45 miles an hour, 36 feet. We are still not out of the infield here. We put a little angle on it, now we're 121. We're in the green. In general, I think we want our hitters' success to be predicated on their own results. If you hit the ball to where there's 3 people as opposed to where there are 6, you got less people covering more area. You do that by hitting the ball hard in the air. And yes, at the youth level, you absolutely can have success putting the ball on the ground. The thing to consider is that this is not an all or nothing thing, right? Just because I'm trying to hit the ball in the air does not mean that I'm never going to hit ground balls. You are going to generate hard ground ball contact with that, with any approach. It's going to happen. However, if you can generate more balls that are hitting the green, you're going to have more success because the ball's going to go farther. This is just numbers. as we move forward, I think it's really important, and especially this probably has to do with the 9, 10, 11s, and 12s, to understand that I might go to a kid and go, hey, you need to hit the ball in the air, or you need to hit the ball hard in the air, you want a line drive approach, we want to outfield ground balls, however you want to parse it, right? This is the approach that we want. If I take a kid who's doing stuff that works for them, and I just go, well, I'm the player Deven training guy, I know what works for you, and I take a kid who has an approach that's working, and I screw him up for what? For the sake of my own ego? To prove that I'm right? I have done a disservice to this kid. So I like this quote from Stan the Man. The one unbreakable rule about hitting is this: if a batter hits well enough with his own particular stance and swing, think twice or more before suggesting a change. Kids do funky things. Adults do funky things. I've been watching Barry Bonds, Hank Aaron, Bobby Bonds, the hand pump for like 2 weeks. I don't understand it. I can't make sense of it. I can't make sense of the timing of it. Gary Sheffield, same thing. This hand pump out here, I don't understand how you have that movement in your barrel and you can be on time at the highest level of competition, highest level of consequence. It doesn't make sense to me. It works for them. So what do we want to do? We have this idea that we want our players to develop a perfect swing. And it's important to understand that perfection in baseball is a function of more than just your movement on the swing. If I take a group of 10-year-olds, we can train them to understand what a perfect bicep curl is, right? Because in that action, everything else is isolated. I do nothing but move this, and we can teach them, lock out the shoulder, hold the abs tight, work this. We can build that kind of perfection. Baseball is different. And Albert Pujols obviously has one of the most perfect swings of all time. And in this particular instance, and against my beloved Brandon McCarthy, he had a perfect result. Doesn't get any more perfect. But that has everything to do with his ability to perceive the location and the speed of the ball. And it has nothing to do with his mechanical approach. If you look at this one, here's another guy who is noted to have one of the most perfect swings of all time, Barry Bonds. And he took his perfect swing onto a Japanese game show facing a guy who was jumping about 15 to 20 feet in the air off of a trampoline. And his perfect swing didn't work. Mechanically, there's nothing wrong with what Barry's doing. Arguably, Barry has one of the most perfect swings of all time, but it didn't work in this particular setting because of pitch location and perceived pitch speed. So let's understand what we're trying to build here, right? The point being that if we can't train perception and train location, all that stuff about trying to define where the ball is and when to swing, it doesn't matter how good our mechanics are. I will tell you, Barry does strike out here. He made an adjustment and he hit a tater, and he added a leg kick. Barry Bonds, Mr. Everything is on my back foot, was able to succeed in this particular environment by adding a leg kick. I don't know why it works, but I know that he allowed his body to move himself in a way to solve that particular problem. This is my science warning. It's crazy that he was throwing strikes. It's insane. They had.
He looked about 18 or 17 too.
This is my science warning. What are we trying to do when we're teaching a baseball swing? We're trying to teach a motor problem. This is motor learning. There's a guy, Nikolai Bernstein, who's basically the founder of everything that we understand about human biomechanical movement. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. He came up with 2 principles by watching factory workers swing a hammer. One is that the body will self-organize itself around a given activity. My pattern is not going to be the same as yours, but once we get proficient with the movement, our body self-organizes around the goal that we're trying to achieve. In this instance, you're talking about swinging a hammer. Part 2 of Bernstein has to do with when this doesn't work, right? What he calls mechanical inefficiency is basically when you can't solve that problem, when you can't swing the bat, when you can't throw that hammer. It happens because of 2 things, because of time and tension. Time, what we're talking about is when we're watching our kids start to learn how to ride a bicycle, right? When they're going slow, everything is super wonky. Right? Everything looks very uncoordinated. It's when they get up to speed that the body starts to self-organize, and now all of a sudden these big herky-jerky leg movements, everything smooths out because they brought themselves up to speed. Tension is either emotional tension or physical tension. And in Little League Baseball, with these kids we're working with, there is a ton of emotional and mental tension. I saw a game a couple seasons ago, Lower Shoreline. Kid on the hill is throwing absolute gas. Their team is up, they might have been up $1 billion, it didn't really matter. The game was basically over, they're just finishing their at-bats. Kid comes up to the plate, and he comes up with this. Eyes on the ground. You know, he might as well have been going to a funeral. He gets in the plate, first pitch comes down, it was in the catcher's glove before he swung. Strike one. Dad's in the stands. You gotta swing faster. Pitch number 2 comes in. And again, he is barely here before the ball. Strike 2. Dad, sensing the urgency of the situation in a game that they have no shot of actually winning, and the kid is already wearing 2 strikes, goes, "You gotta swing faster!" Okay? I heard it, and I'm from here to the cookies. Okay? Coaches on his team heard it, coaches on the other team heard it. Most importantly, you know who else heard it? Pitcher. So what does the pitcher serve up? The classic Little League 0-2 changeup. And the kid at the plate, he heard Dad. He heard the urgency. He understood everything, and he goes, I got to make Dad happy. So instead of that kid having an option to trust himself and his eyes and his brain and able to perceive where that pitch was and its speed, the ball is barely out of the pitcher's hands before he is whomp all the way through it. And it just sails in. It's just a cookie. Now, I don't know that that kid would have actually been able to hit that ball and put barrel on bat, even if he had been playing in a soundproof box. But for a variety of reasons, 1, in terms of decreasing tension, and 2 is some stuff that we'll get to later. We absolutely have to do our best to remove tension from these kids as they play the game. So we want them to self-organize, right? We want to go, we're going to go full Bernstein, right? We want the body to self-organize around a given objective. Well, how do we do that with the kid, with this kid, 386 errors, right? We have to guide self-organization. To simply just go to little Timmy or little Janet, Janet, what we're going to do is we're going to hit the ball hard, we're going to hit the ball hard. Janet's going to go, all right, cool. Everything is going out the window because they don't understand how to self-organize yet. And we can go, we want you to remove time, we want you to remove tension, but we have to guide this process. Understanding that one of the things you're going to see here generally is as kids start an activity, a motor learning pattern, what they generally do at first, and this is actually really true when it comes to throwing, is that they will lock out everything else in their bodies and they just throw here, right? They throw here because they're so focused on executing this one particular motion that in order to control that motion, they lock everything else up, right? What happens as we go from skill knowledge to skill mastery is we actually see these kids find more degrees of freedom in the way that they move. It's not that they find one movement and that movement is perfect, is that they are able to compensate and find movement to solve a problem. And whether that is throwing a ball or swinging a bat. So the deal to understand is when we see them at the plate and it's this, there's a reason. As we move into this section, I think it's another thing, it's just I try to throw a little warning out there, is that as coaches, I want to be the guy that has the answer for all my players. I want to be the guy that has the answer for my kids. And when they have a mishit, I want to give it to them. Oh, you did this. You let your hands get under your elbow, or your back elbow was too high, your head was moving too much. And when we watch these kids, it's really important to, again, understand that so much of the thing that we're trying to solve, the thing that we're trying to build, has everything to do with perceiving location of the ball, and it has a little bit less to do with actually how they move to solve it. And when we do the power coach thing, kids in the box, do this with your body, do that with your body. We are literally inhibiting their ability to solve that problem mentally. So how are we going to guide them along this path to finding the way that their body moves best? one way that you can do that is through what's called a constraint-led approach. And the constraint-led approach, the idea is not to find, again, one singular way to move the body, but it's to give them tasks and goals that allows them to find their own way to move the body. We want to teach a goal rather than a movement and allow them to find their pattern, which again, I'm going to connect back to this thing about not having a ground ball pattern. If you give kids a goal, and the goal is to not hit ground balls, and I'll show you on the next slide how we can do that. You can watch how their bodies will start to move and acclimate to that. The other part of this is that we have to, when we're crafting our practices, if our practice is everybody's quiet, we're all in a nice little semicircle, and we're watching little Johnny, he's on the tee, and Johnny takes a swing, and we go, good job, Johnny. Very nice. And then we get to the game, and the coach is yelling, the kids on the team are yelling, the other coach is yelling, the parents are yelling. They can't acclimate to game speed. They can't acclimate to the game environment. So if I had more time, we would go into this a little bit deeper, but I would suggest that your practices at a certain point, push them out of their comfort zone. Make it chaotic. Make it crazy, because the game is going to get easier. So what do these constraints look like in practice, right? So this is an NAIA school. And they call this the Great Wall of Ground Ball Prevention, okay? The idea being that all this fence stuff here enforces a movement pattern that's going to get a ball over the fence. You can do this at a Little League practice and say not a single word about launch angle. What I say, everybody likes puppies, right? You guys like puppies? Yeah, coach, we love puppies. What's your puppy's name? Oh, my puppy's name is Rocket. Oh, all right, what's Rocket? He's like, okay, great. Well, here's the deal. I want you to imagine this ground ball is filled with nothing but puppies. And they look just like Rocket. It's Rocket's little brothers, little sisters. Just like Rocket. Now, when you go up to the plate, do you want to hit Rocket in the head with a baseball? No, coach. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to set up a tee right here. I want you to imagine this infield is filled with nothing but puppies. And I'll take small cones to delineate kind of everything out around the front part of the outfield. Okay, let's find a movement pattern that doesn't end up with you hitting a puppy in the head with a baseball. That's our constraint. That is our constraint. We're trying to give them a goal and let them figure it out. Another way that we can give constraints is physical constraints. We have a backspin tee here, and the tee that we're actually trying to hit on here. If I say to a kid, I want you to try to get on plane with the ball so we can generate a line drive that's going out somewhere between 10 and 30 degrees. Again, this doesn't make sense. If I say, you figure out a movement pattern, then instead of being choppy here, gets here. Let them figure it out. The other way that we do this is variability. And I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but one way that we can train variability in Little League practice is not having the coach throw front toss BP. Have the players throw front toss BP. Or in your case, if you throw crappy BP like I do, have me do it. Have the kids throw front toss BP, because it's not going to be perfect every time. And yes, at a certain extent, we need to build confidence and try to be a little bit repeatable. But once we move to that point where we're past skill knowledge and we want to move towards skill mastery, we have to give them variabilities to solve in practice, because that's what they have in a game.
Is that guy throwing two balls? I can't.
It's two pitches overlaid. So what we have is he's mixing, it's a front toss, one that's pretty hard, right, and another that's soft. So what you get is the same swing, the same approach, but depending on where he is in his swing, one ball that's a little bit oppo, a little bit right center, and another one that ends up pulled down the line. And we're allowing that variability to be what he's trying to solve with movement. Now, when we coach the result, right, when we had this constraint-led approach, and we're trying to guide them towards self-organization, there's really two different ways that we can go about doing it. One is internal cueing, and what we mean by internal cueing is giving that player something to think about that has to do with what their body is doing internally. The other thing that we can do is give them an external cue. So we're trying to have them focus on an effect or something that is outside of their bodies that guides them in a way to move. As an adult and as a coach, this Miguel Cabrera kind of thing about how he's swinging and how his body moves and where his head is and how his back ribs or back elbow stays close to his ribs, this is great for me. I would never show this to a kid. because they're going to internalize all this stuff about what he's doing and start thinking about what they're doing. And again, the reason that we try to move away from internal cues is that internal cues literally slow anybody, but especially kids, their ability to make a cognitive decision. And that's that thing where I go, I'm going to swing. I would argue that this type of external cueing is more effective than that Cabrera thing if I was trying to teach pitching. And I would go, oh yeah, well look, it's Maddox, hidden dragon, cat on the foot, has legs, uses them, gray undershirt. Because if I give this to a kid, I'll go, hey, throw like Maddox, find a dragon on your back. I don't know how the kid's going to perceive that, but I know that they're not going to be thinking about any mechanical internal stuff that's going to slow their ability. Find the dragon on your back. Go ahead, figure it out. Cody Atkinson runs, Ray Atkinson runs Atkinson Baseball. It's a pretty big select program around here. Had this great thing on his Twitter, and he's talking about when he's working with kids, when we're asking them questions about what they feel or what they did, it's never about the next swing. We're not trying to look into the future. What did you just get? How did it make you feel? How did that last thing make you feel? Let's talk about it, figure out, okay, now let's move forward in this next thing with a blank slate. And again, we cannot inhibit perception. Anything that we do to these kids, it inhibits their ability to perceive. Again, it doesn't matter how perfect their swing mechanics are because they're not going to be on time. Scientifically, the athlete, what happens when an athlete moves while conscious of his body? The athlete constrains the motor system by interfering with automatic motor control processes that normally regulate the movement. Automatic motor control processes, what we're talking about is the decision to swing. When I'm working on a tee, if I'm just swinging by myself, I'm here and I feel and I feel and I go now to swing. If I'm seeing live pitching, that's not really a decision where I go, aha, swing. It's got to take place subconsciously. It has to take place so fast for me that you can't think about it. And the same is true with kids, because even if a kid is seeing a 35 or 40 mile an hour pitch, and I'm up at what's the Funplex or whatever place, and I'm seeing 55 miles an hour, which is about as much as I can hit. It's the same in terms of what they're used to. This is a new thing that they're trying to do. They're trying to perceive speed. So when we get them thinking about their own body, they start interfering with the part of the brain that deals with that reaction. We cannot allow us to inhibit their perception. So talking about the swing, we want to load, we want to coil. Why do we do that? We do it because we're trying to take advantage of something that's called a stretch shortening cycle. The idea being that if I make a counter move with my body, I'm able to generate more force than if I was just to do that. Same thing as jumping up in the air. I am not going to jump in the air off of my front feet and just kind of figure it out. I'm making a counter move to generate force. When we load, when I load with my hands go back and my hips load, I'm using the stretch shortening cycle to generate force. The important thing to understand about this is that the benefit that we get out of that in terms of the force that we can produce decays over time. When we're cueing this with kids, how do we want to do it? I'm a big fan of pocket to the pitcher. Big fan of pocket to the pitcher, because I can say to a kid, if you're here, pitcher's there, pocket to the pitcher. What we're talking about is just a little bit of internal loading, where that back pocket is shown in the pitcher. Now I could say to a kid, I want you to feel the tension in your back knee. I want you to load against that rear femur until you feel your cleats are almost digging out of the ground, and then I want you to explode. Again, now we're starting talking about internal stuff that inhibits their ability to perceive. If I give an external cue, pocket to the pitcher, now that's something they can figure out, and it's not inhibiting, they're not thinking about their own bodies. And in terms of how we load the top half, belly button of the catcher is fine. I think knob to the catcher is another thing where we get this good counter rotation where we're going back to the pitcher, or back to the catcher rather, and I'm not saying to them something that's internalizing a thought that they have about their movement. What does it look like with the best in the world? Where here's Yohan Moncada, and if you watch this clip, you got two things going on simultaneously very beautifully. This is why you get signed for like $30 million. Watch the belt buckle, a little bit of internal rotation, and the knob slowly towards the catcher, all in sequence, right? Knob to catcher, pocket to pitcher. So two cues you can give to any kid, and they will make sense. My load, however, is not going to be the same if I'm hitting as Nate's, as it is Dave's, as is Chris's. Understand that there's a tremendous variety of the positions that they start in with where they end up. In this launch position, however, you know, Babe and David Ortiz, tremendous difference in how they start, that they end up in the same position generally in terms of when they're ready to launch. So we're dissimilar in pre-launch, but we're trying to get to that same spot. Ioannis Cespedes, absolutely picture perfect. This is a clip that works in 3 ways. There's a first primary load. You can see it goes a little bit deeper where we start to actually get the movement on the swing. And then right here in the full swing, belt buckle, nod to catcher, home run, go Mets. Josh Donaldson, here's a different way to do it, right? Donaldson infamous for the big leg kick. He's not down early with that big leg kick. It's on time. And there's a huge difference between that. And I can tell you the reason why that's effective. It's because we're coming back to the stretch shortening cycle. If he gets this big leg kick and holds all that power in that back hip and gets down here and waits, it goes away. Less than 1/4 of a second. Most of the benefit that we have in that stretch shortening cycle evaporates completely. You might as well not have done it in the first place. Charlie Blackman, how does he load? Very smooth. Minor movements, right? Minor movements. And everything that he does, again, allows him to be on plane, on time. But we're seeing the hips work back in terms of the belt buckle right there closed, and the hands work back, a little nod to the catcher. Again, here's Barry in a much more fair environment. You can see the hand pump working. Barry's hip turn, very slight, but gets loaded and gets on time. Another thing to consider when we're working with kids is that there's going to be tremendous variations in how this looks, again, because of time and perception about seeing a moving ball. Griffey was not a huge leg kick guy. In a lot of these clips, he's just short and direct to it, but I guarantee you on the first clip in here, where he's got that little bit of leg click, he was early, and he allowed his body to move to solve that problem. Again, we're not trying to get down early, we're trying to get down on time. So when we start to swing the bat, what do we want to be? We want to be fast. And what is fast? Fast is not a straight line. Never was, never will be. This is just science stuff. The Brachistochrone curve basically tells us that we're accelerating an object in space. Any kind of accelerated curve is always going to be faster. And I know that I had coaches when I was a kid that went, we're knob to the ball, straight line, that's fastest path. Except it's not. It's not, and it never was, and it never will be. And the fact that it also does not put us in a good place to have the bat on plane and on time is also not good. We can take a look at how this actually works in a swing. Again, highest level of consequence, highest level of competition, and we have a very nice accelerated curve. Ted from Ted's book, The Williams Stroke, the hubris. Slight upstroke matches the trajectory of the incoming pitch, increasing area of solid contact. There's another slide here that I didn't include, but this really gets the gist of it. If we get this level stroke, right? This level stroke that comes down and gets on plane and is here. My window of making good quality hard contact on the ball is about here, because my barrel is literally slicing through the zone. If my timing is not perfect and I can't get here, it doesn't matter. But my window is very, very short. If I get on plane, I can be on plane here, 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 here. We're talking about time that the barrel spends in the zone in order to try to get quality contact between a round ball and a round bat. This is the other reason that if we go, I want you to try to train to hit hard ground or hard line drives, and we generate a Ted Williams slight upswing, we are literally giving them more time with the barrel in the zone. I can give you some guys ways that they, at the highest level, think about it. We're talking about not chopping wood. We're talking about not being short. We're trying to generate a swing. It's the barrel in the zone for the longest amount of time. If you're chopping wood, you're trying to get your bat at a single spot in space, which again, if you go back to that the last clip, that's the single spot in space, right? Which is dependent upon me perceiving the location and the speed of that ball perfectly to get there on time. And for sure, there are people that have been successful with that approach. I would say to you that when we're working with kids, this approach that allows us to be successful from here to here is way more likely to benefit our players than this one. If we go 2 ahead, one of the things that we gain when we get the barrel on plane is adjustability. This is again Miguel Cabrera, one of the most perfect swings. His barrel finds a way to be on plane, up and in, up middle, up away, down middle, down in. The shortcut here, or the secret, is that it's his torso angle that actually controls this, not necessarily the hands or the way that the swing is. You can watch anything up in the zone, torso stands way more upright. This stuff down and away, the torso moves to accommodate barrel on plane and on time. Diamond kinetics. What does it look like, right? So here's a swing. And the swing is initiated in the diamond kinetics sensor, which is an analytic sensor that goes on the end of a bat and tracks the way the bat moves in space. Measures distance in the zone, right? We're in zone, in zone, in zone. When we end up here, we get almost 3 feet of barrel in zone because we were on plane. Not chopping through, I am on plane. Now, I would agree that up at this 35, 36 inch range, up at that top, that's not quality contact. But I give myself a chance to be successful from here, clear the way out to there, depending on how I perceive the speed and location of the pitch.
What's the typical angle of the approach to the ball?
I've heard anything from like a -6 degree to more than that. I think a lot of that depends on speed. If you want to get technical, the Magnus effect is how drag affects the ball and how much it decreases over time. I think 6 is what I've heard and seems to be kind of generally agreed upon. I don't know that there's any correlation though between that figure at the major league level and the youth level. But the point being that it's for sure decelerating and coming down. So if, maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm right about getting the barrel on plane. Why are there so many major league guys, high level guys, best of the world, who go, yeah, you gotta chop down. I gotta chop down. This is A-Rod doing a demo on Fox when Daniel Murphy was literally terrorizing the Dodgers, hitting nothing but home run after home run and giving me PTSD. And how did A-Rod explain this in the studio? Well, he explained it in A-Rod fashion with a dollar bill on the ground, because he's trying to emphasize squish the bug, and he's going, boom, chopping straight down. And what do we get from this when we chop straight down? Oh, the ball just goes up that way. Why? Backspin. Backspin, for sure, that's what it is. Except it's not. And again, this is just stuff that you can't argue. These guys took a machine into, I believe, the Astrodome and fired a bunch of balls, different types of balls, at a bunch of different speed rates. Spin rates, rather. I'm sorry. Speed was static. The thing to understand is that these balls that spun the most, the ones that had the most backspin, those weren't the hardest hit balls. It was these balls that had less spin that went further. Why? Magnus. As you get more lift from a backspin ball, you also get more drag. Backspin is not the be-all, end-all equalizer for ball carrying and ball flight. It's just not. This is just science stuff, and no matter what A-Rod wants to tell you, it's not what's happening. So what was Daniel Murphy doing when he was actually absolutely destroying Dodger pitching? Barrel on plane and on time. There's nothing down and choppy about what he's doing. There's nothing really squish the bug doing about what he's got, because his back foot is coming off the ground at contact. I mean, it's planning again real fast, but he's not sitting on that back foot at all. There's no Barry Bonds there. That is barrel on plane and on time. If you go to the next slide, well, what did A-Rod do? A-Rod very famously has a whole series of videos with Kevin Long, who's a longtime hitting coordinator for the Yankees. That's all knob to ball. Knob to ball, straight down. Backspin. Backspin's going to save me, except what did A-Rod actually do? Got the barrel on plane, on time, and he's coming up at the ball at contact. The point being is that if the best guys in the world can't describe the feel that they have for what works for them, I certainly can't count on a 9, 10, 11, or a 12-year-old to be able to figure that out. So again, we want to try to guide them along this way of what gets them towards the goal that we want. Go ahead to the next one. Again, we're talking, it's not about what the hitter is doing with their bodies or even their ability to describe it. They know better about what they feel. I, as a coach, know more about what they see. I don't necessarily need to be right, and what they tell me about how they feel with their bodies move doesn't necessarily need to be right. Bacon is good, regardless of how it's cooked. There's no either or there. How did Ted conceptualize being on time? It's really kind of two things. We're trying to recognize the pitch, and at the youth level, I mean, you know, I'm probably going to be coaching AAA next year. Nobody's throwing spitballs and curves and sliders. It's not necessarily recognition of pitch, but I am trying to locate, I'm trying to recognize the pitch first and then make my decision to swing. Kevin Wilson, who's the USA Baseball hitting instructor, again, it's the same thing. Timing is the #1 key to hitting. If you're on time, it helps your mechanics, your direction, your pitch recognition, and results. You have to be on time. Have to, which again, reemphasizes this idea that we cannot inhibit players' ability to perceive speed. What does it look like when you're on time? This is Mike Trout on a ZEP sensor, and you can see that at the beginning of his swing, right, his hand speed, which is this lower line, and the bat speed are moving pretty simultaneously, but his hand speed kind of caps out around here. Once he gets the barrel on plane and on time, the barrel continues to accelerate, basically hitting the peak at the exact moment of impact. I put that on there just to understand that I think we have this kind of misconception sometimes that there are some ideal ways to make contact in terms of getting out front of it, or let it go deep, let it travel. I would suggest to you that the location is less important than our desired result, which is hard contact. I would rather have a player hit a hard ball anywhere, oppo, pull side, middle, than try to let the ball artificially travel deep and inhibit their ability to just fire, to solve that problem. Again, how do we train for time? That's right, I did kind of duplicated this now because I added that other slide. It's the same thing, this idea of allowing variability in terms of the way that we train. I'll skip the link that this goes to. The Hitting Vault, which is a service that last year we paid for as a league, has a bunch of drills. One of them that's really good for this kind of stuff, they call track and catch. What it is a player here, coach throws in a ball, and I'm catching it. We're just trying to get them acclimated to tracking the ball and finding it in space. And we can start with just here to here, me to Dave. We can build this thing from the ground up in terms of their ability to track the flight of the ball. And I would posit to you that, like at the AA level, having them take 50 to 100 reps off of a tee doesn't do anything to solve this problem. And this is the problem that they see in the game. Taking less swings and spending more time training perception, training tracking the ball, is probably more valuable. This is the same thing. Coach Jeff Leach I stole from. Have your players throw your front toss. And for sure, you probably want to put a helmet on them. For sure, maybe one of those ones with the softball mask, because that's the last thing we need as a coach or a player catching the ball in the face. But the idea being that we know what they're going to see is chaotic. The number of pitchers that they're going to see that throw repeatable strikes is very low, even the best ones that we have. So let's train for that. What's our intention? It's a classic Babe Ruth quote. I swing as hard as I can. I try to swing right through the ball. I swing big with everything. I hit big or I miss big. I would submit to you that at the Little League level, there's no reason to not have this approach, right? No contract, no scholarship. We're trying to have fun. And if we allow them to cut loose and have fun, not only are we giving them encouragement to just kind of destigmatize some of the negative consequences that come with baseball, but bring it back to Bernstein. If we take away time and tension, we're giving them the freedom to find a movement pattern that works best for them, right? So the idea that we're trying to get them to cut loose in terms of intention is actually going to reinforce them finding a movement pattern that optimizes what they're trying to do. This is such a crappy MS Paint drawing, I'm sorry, I tried to find a slide for this and I couldn't. Fearlessness, the idea being that fearlessness is this bridge that's going to get us over the fear and the doubt that comes at these kids when they're playing the game. Last year at the AA level, we had a player on our team who's a completely green, never played baseball before. He started the season very much this, or locked out everything else because I don't have the mastery, I don't even have skill knowledge, so I don't have that skill mastery where I can move, right? So it's just this. Towards the end of the season, he started to make consistent contact. And for me, as a coach for him, it was like, man, if he made contact, he puts the ball in play, that's a win for that player, right? We get to the end of the year, runners on first and thirds, 2 outs, little double R, he's up at the plate, hits the ball, and he gets out. Inning's over, he comes back to the dugout, the tears start coming. And I'm trying to tell him, man, hey, you did the right thing. Instead of being tense up there and worried and frozen, he perceived pitch speed, pitch location, swung the bat, made contact. The rest of it is gravy. The rest of it's icing, because he already solved that problem as best he could. Hank Aaron has a great way to look at this. And I hate pitchers. Always hated them, always will. I love this quote, pitcher has only got a ball, I got a bat. So the percentage of weapons is in my favor. We can impart this type of intention and approach to kids. And not go, yeah, try to hit the ball and hit the pitcher, but man, you got a bat. You got a bat, he's just got a glove. You're up. You're up in the score. Another thing to understand when we start talking about cultivating approach is just because it's a strike does not necessarily mean you need to swing. Here's Trout on time and on plane on 95. He's swinging at a ball that he knows he's going to have good results on as a hit, in terms of the ball that he wants to hit. If we can start to get these kids to understand that based on whatever your movement pattern is, are you more successful about high pitches? Are you more successful with the low stuff? Do you want this nice belt middle pitch? If we start to get them accountable to understand the stuff that they have good results on, now, again, we're starting to help their perception, right? Because you're going, okay, you just had good results on a pitch that was letter high, right? Let's look for that pitch. And for sure, if you're wearing 2 strikes, man, we got to get barrel on ball. We got to get that. But up until that point, let's be fearless and look for what you want. Let the players start to be accountable for the type of pitch that they want to see. And how do we win the at-bat? Again, it's the same thing with my little buddy Double R. It is not necessarily about getting a hit, having a hard hit line drive, hitting a homer, whatever. It's not about that. Andy McKay, who's the Mariners player dev guy, they break it down in a way that I think is absolutely applicable to kids. He's talking about if you win a pitch, right, and you win an at-bat, we're boiling down to 3 things. Were you ready to hit? Right? Were you ready? You know, were you mentally engaged in the at-bat? Were you ready to swing at that pitch? Were you committed to your approach? Did you understand what you're trying to go after? And did you see it? Did you see it? Has nothing to do with me even making contact. These are quantifiable goals that we can give to kids. You can have a player in the dugout start to track this stuff. Kid comes back in the dugout. Hey, did you see it? Were you ready? Okay, good. Check mark for little Timmy. It has nothing to do with whether you even put the bat on the ball. So what is our approach? Again, Yogi Berra, wise and eminent sage, you can't think and hit at the same time. If you click, if you click, your mouse should show up. You move the little trackpad around, the trackpad.
I'm trying. We have made it?
Here. Back to this one, where, let's see if I can get this to work.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
I've been asked many times.
This is what we don't
Casey,
want.
What are your swing thoughts as you're swinging? What are the secrets? What are the secrets of golf that pros know? Well, I heard this one time, and I remembered it. It's really, if you write this down, it really helped. what I try to do, I try to flat load my feet so I can snap load my power package. That way I can amplify both lag and drag pressure through impact fix. As long as my number 2 power accumulator doesn't break down, I can reach maximum centrifugal force with minimum pivotal resistance. You see, the pivot is the utilization of multiple centers to produce a circular motion for generating centrifugal force on an adjusted plane. I can belabor the point. We watch the whole thing. It's about a minute of him just throwing nothing but verbiage at you. But the point being that I've just blabbered at you for about an hour about hitting. Again, we really have to be cognizant of the way that this stuff applies to kids and understand that we want to try to guide them towards a movement solution, give them an intention level, destigmatize our negative consequences to the point that they can figure out the way that they move the best. I don't want my kids to come to this presentation, because if they start getting their own heads about the way that they move, I know that I am not only probably screwing up their movement, but I'm also doing significant damage to their ability to perceive the ball, to make that choice when I go swing. I'm doing damage. What do we want to try to do? Give them permission to fail. Again, when we're trying to win a pitch, we're trying to win an at-bat, it has nothing to do with actually getting a hit. De-incentivize any of the negative consequences, right? And the biggest thing for that when it comes to hitting is striking out. We want to take away tension, because if we take away tension and we get them up to game speed, so time is not an inhibitor, now we're back to Bernstein. Now we're back to Bernstein #1, where they find an optimal move solution to solve a problem. And we have to incentivize fearlessness. However, my caveat, last year with my team, we had a game where we had a bunch of called third strikes. I said, hey guys, doesn't matter if we strike out. You get 2 strikes on you, go up there, try to hit as hard as you can. I want you to have a more fearless approach at 2 strikes than you do with 1 or 0. Try to get after it, try to be fearless. They said, okay coach. And I said, if you get a called third strike, at the end of the game, we're going to get in a huddle and you're going to do a dance for all of us. You're going to do a dance, you're going to do a dance for 10 seconds. We're going to watch you. And I'm going to try to cultivate this fearless approach, right? One of my players had a called third strike, and as soon as it happened, he's coming back to the dugout and the tears start coming. Because he goes, now I got to dance in front of all my friends and I'm going to be embarrassed. Well, coach, you just screwed that up. Try to find a way that doesn't lead to tears, where we can cultivate that fearless approach, very much like Vlad Guerrero is here. I read a great article about Cuban ball players a couple weeks ago, and other players from Latin America, South America. They're talking about how if you grow up and you're not even playing stickball, you're playing with rocks and branches and stuff, to get off that island, to get noticed, you know what you got to do. You got to do something to make people pay attention. So when you get signed, when you get to the majors, everything else is icing on the cake, because you already made it. That type of fearless approach that allows for these type of swings is the same thing that we can cultivate in Little League Baseball. Because they're kids. We want to let kids play a kid's game. And for sure, at a certain level, when you get to 11, 12, 13, the wins start to matter, right? The wins for sure start to matter. However, there's a way that we can balance these things where we still allow them to be loose and have fun. I think, oh no, we got a couple more slides, I'll get you out of here. So let's talk about perfection, right? Well, the best in the world get it wrong. Todd Frazier hits a home run here. The bat is literally no longer in his hands. So again, when we're talking about a perfect swing, this panacea of what we want to build for kids, understand that if the barrel gets on plane and on time, you literally don't even need to be holding it to have good results. I have heard this goofy study that people keep referencing that I can't find that says if your head has more than 4 inches of movement at the major league level, you are effectively blind when the pitch comes in. Now, even if I can't find the study, I assume that this was somehow correct at one particular point in time. It's also important to understand that that's not always the case. Hank Aaron has probably a good 18 to 24 feet of head movement there. Still hits a tater. Now, I will tell you that this was during like an exhibition or a home run derby or something like that. So for sure, this is not him seeing Sandy Koufax throwing just filth, right? But you can watch Hank Aaron's game stuff,
And a lot of this stuff is still present. He's getting upfield. He's got a little bit of the hand pump. Guys move differently. And if we allow them to find a way that moves for them, rather than installing an idea that I have about what I think that they should move, the odds are probably that they will be successful at what they're doing. Because again, Bernstein comes back to the same thing. We're letting them find an optimal movement pattern. We're taking away time and tension for them to discover it. Here's Bryce Harper, arm barring, right? We see this a lot at the youth level, where that front arm just flattens out. We get here. Circumstantially, maybe working off of a tee, if I see a kid who's just arm barring, yeah, maybe that's not great. But sometimes stuff works. When Josh Donaldson really came to prominence, when he went to Toronto from Oakland and had the big front leg kick, right? Everybody goes, oh, well, we got to kind of come back to this thing where my front foot has to be open at contact. My front foot is pointing towards the pitcher at contact. Well, Giancarlo Stanton had the most productive season of his life last year, and if you watch what he did, he got increasingly more closed as the season went on. I don't know why that worked for him. I don't know that he could adequately describe why it worked for him. It worked because he was on time and on plane, and that's the way that his body moved to solve that problem. Here's old Teddy Williams, flattening out the bat. We see this again a lot at the youth level, where we get here, and the bat kind of gets flat, and then we get this. My son, when he was younger, had a lot of this, where it would get here. I sent that video to a hitting coach that I like his work a lot, and he goes, well, he's flattening out the bat. Yeah, well, shit, man, I'm sorry. I went, geez, I gotta figure this out. I gotta figure out why he's flattening out the bat. I want both of my kids to be the best hitters that they can be. I don't want my son to have a flat bat. Then I'm watching him hit one day, and let's assume that I'm about this tall. The tee at its lowest setting was about here. He's flattening out the bat instead of this to this, because that's where the ball is in relationship to his body. On this particular pitch for Ted, a little bit up the letters, he had to get flat in order to get barrel on plane and on time. Again, this is another thing you see at the youth level, a little bat wrap, right? Where we're here and that bat starts to work its way here. There's a thing called the Pareto principle, where the idea is that you want to find the point where if I've got two attributes, two things I'm trying to improve, I want to find the point where I improve one thing the most and I don't take away from another thing. Maybe Carlos Gonzalez would be a better hitter if he didn't wrap the bat behind his head. Maybe Joey Little League would be a better hitter if he didn't wrap the bat around his head. But if it works for him, if I take away his movement, whatever is allowing him to be on time, to perceive pitch location, to get good results, I'm doing more damage than I am good. And that's all I got. Use a bunch of coaches whose material I have blatantly stolen or cribbed or appreciated. And that's all I got. Thank you guys.